fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Hi there, Duke fans. DBR Bites time, episode 155. I have to admit, we thought about, is this a Bites? Is this a regular episode? It's mostly a preview, so it's a Bites, but it could be kind of long. There may be a lot to say. There's a lot going on in college basketball. I'm Jason Evans. I'm joined by my buddy, Donald Wine. Donald, 24 hours ago, less than 24 hours ago, I think, you were chatting with our good buddy, Jordan Brenner. Folks, if you have not listened to that episode, Jordan and Donald are always, Jordan's always great, isn't he?
Yeah, it was a fun interview. It's good to have him on. And yeah, we talked a lot. We saved a lot of the stuff we could have said about you, Jason, for later. So it's just everyone with their imaginations can sit there and go, what could they possibly have been thinking about? But no, it was a great interview. Yeah. Always glad to have him on. And hopefully, as I mentioned, we'll have more to talk about with him a little bit later.
Yeah. If we keep on winning, we'll keep on bringing Jordan on because he knows the tournament, he knows Duke basketball, he knows all that stuff. So, but we are here today primarily to talk about Duke's next game against our opponent, St. John's. But Donald, before we get to that, I thought maybe just a little perspective on where the tournament is right now, things that are going on. By the way, we will be addressing the coaching situation at North Carolina and potentially at NC State. We'll be talking about that a little later in this episode. You know, take care of some business, then have a little bit of fun, perhaps, I guess you'd put it that way. But, you know, I just want to talk about the tournament in general for half a second, Donald. In the previous 40 years, there have only been 7 times where 13, 14, and 15 seeds failed to win a game. It's now happened 2 years in a row. There's a lot of conversation, Donald, about whether Cinderella is completely dead. As we approach the Sweet 16, there are 6 Big Ten teams, 4 SEC teams, 3 Big 12 teams, 2 Big East teams, and 1 ACC team. I point that out not to dog on the ACC, although, man, not a good performance by the ACC, but to point out that there are 0 teams from anything but the 5 power conferences still alive. It's only the second time in NCAA tournament history where the Sweet 16 is made up entirely of power conference teams. The only other time it happened was last year. Mm-hmm. Is Cinderella dead? She's at least reeling. And it should be pointed out, by the way, when you look at like the mid-majors, the small majors who made it to the round of 32, I'm talking about Utah State, Virginia Commonwealth, St. Louis, even a smaller team like High Point, they're all kind of known like all those teams are sort of like the biggest spenders in their conferences in terms of NIL. It's not a shock. I'm not breaking any news. No one should be surprised to hear it. Follow the money. St. Louis for the past couple of years has been paying for a good team. They made the round of 32. Same with Virginia Commonwealth. The teams from the power conferences that can afford to pay more even than those smaller conference teams. Although, by the way, it's worth noting, like Virginia Commonwealth and St. Louis probably had NIL budgets not entirely dissimilar from like a BC or a Georgia Tech this year. I mean, those. So anyway, my bottom line is the money has determined who has made it this far. And I think to some extent, we've got this, ridiculously tough, really stacked Sweet 16, just like we did a year ago, because these are the teams that have committed the resources. So there are no easy games, Donald. There's no such thing as an easy path anymore, is there?
Well, I recall the conversation I had yesterday with Jordan, and we talked a little bit about the fact that the way I described it is Cinderella isn't dead. She's just wearing a different dress, right? And the dress right now is of that of Texas, and the glass slipper doesn't fit the mid-major like it used to. But he also pointed out that, hey, when we talk about NIL, we have to talk about, how they have those graphics of the starting five from each Sweet 16 team and where they all went to, where they started their college career. There's a lot of mid-majors on those graphics, right? It's because NIL has pulled some of those teams apart. And so it's harder for them to reload. They kind of have become not the St. Louis's and the VCUs of the world, but even a High Point, right? High Point, their biggest job this offseason is going to try and keep as many of those guys as possible, because the only bad downside to winning an upset in the NCAA tournament is that everyone knows your guys now, and here come the big schools probably after the season to go, hey, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want that guy to come to our team. And those guys are going to want to jump because they're getting a little bit more money, but also they're getting even more exposure for whatever dreams they may have beyond college.
Well, by the way, we've already heard Gavin Doty from Siena, who every Duke fan, if you don't recall who Gavin Doty is, go rewatch our game against Siena. Heck, go listen to our preview of that game. You and I talked extensively about the guy. Gavin Doty of Siena has already said, I'm entering the transfer portal, and everyone's like, he's going to go to Syracuse. He's going to follow Jerry McNamara to Syracuse. But he's moving from a tiny conference team, a 16 seed, up to an ACC team. In all likelihood, it's possible he won't go, but all signs point to him being a significant player in the ACC next year. I mean, he's probably a guy who's going to be a contender for all ACC based on what we've seen. This is the way it works. If you play well at a smaller level, you move up to the next level. It works for coaches, and it's definitely working for players now as well.
And I think, look, we had some scares for sure, right? We were one of them. Siena gave us a scare. There was a bunch of these little teams that hung with the Blue Bloods and the Power 5 teams for long stretches of their first round games and even their second round games.
Yep.
Now, the final score, you go, oh, well, all of them were eliminated, but at least they were hanging in there. And I think the other thing about this tournament is, in lieu of all the blowouts, right? We've had a lot of. I think Jordan mentioned that this was of the 1 and 2 seeds, it was the largest margin of victory in the first round ever. The average, it was like 38 points or something like that. But you still have some really incredible finishes, right? Kentucky, Santa Clara, how that game finished. One of the greatest endings to a NCAA tournament game ever. Nebraska, Vanderbilt, and even just Nebraska. If I can say real quick about Nebraska, I've been to Nebraska ball in Lincoln when they were bad, and those fans were coming out. They were really behind the team. They came out knowing that this team was going to lose. It was kind of like us at Duke football in the 2000s, and they have built up. Fred Hoiberg has built this team up to the point where now they're in the Sweet 16 for the very first time. They did it. Their longtime play-by-play guy on the radio passed away during the Big Ten, right before the Big Ten tournament started. And this team has been motivated to just excel where they have. And so I'm really happy in a way for having seen up close how much those fans really care, how they traveled to Oklahoma City. Like, Jesus, that was a home game for them. And they had more fans in Oklahoma City than they do in their own arena, which isn't small. It seats like 15,000. So I'm really happy for them. That St. John's, Kansas ender was great. And the High Point, Wisconsin game I thought was great as well. So you have some good games. You have some great moments. You still have those shining moments that when the montage plays, you're going to remember. But yeah, I think the real thing is mid-majors want to get to the table so that they can figure out how to keep their teams intact. And it's becoming ever more difficult to do so by the fact that the teams at the top are spending more money. The teams in the middle are spending even more money to try to catch up to the teams at the top. And that doesn't leave a lot of skin in the game for those mid-majors and those low majors.
So I want to talk about a couple significant facts as we get into Duke's game against St. John's. I'm sure a lot of you have already heard this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Mm-hmm. Every time Duke has won a national title, 1991, 1992, 2001, 2010, 2015, every time we win a national title, it comes in a season where the Blue Devils have defeated St. John's. In fact, I'm fairly sure the reason Duke didn't win the title last year was because we never played St. John's.
St. John's is our tester. I also believe, Jason, if I remember correctly, the 2015 win over St. John's was Coach K's 1,000th win. So there's that as well.
You're great memory. You're right. We were doing we were on our 10th.
That was at the Garden, I believe, too, because 903 that was Michigan State. That was at the Garden, and I think 1,000 was also at the Garden, but against St. John's.
The other thing about Duke and St. John's is, sorry, not St. John's, but Duke and Rick Pitino. Duke has faced Rick Pitino twice in the NCAA tournament. Both times, the winner of the game has ended up winning the national title. When Duke faces Rick Pitino, whoever comes out ahead just keeps on going all the way and doesn't lose again. Obviously, one of them was in 1992. I was famously at that game. The reason everyone remembers that game is because I was standing on the baseline. Either that or it's because Christian Laettner hit the pass from Grant Hill. By the way, I was talking about last weekend, Grant Hill was in my way, when I was trying to watch the game. In that 1992 game, Grant Hill was in my way. I had to lean to the side to see around Grant Hill when he was throwing the pass.
It was a natural callback to the early days.
I should have made that connection earlier. I can't believe it only came to me now. And then, of course, the other time that Duke has played Rick Pitino in the NCAA tournament was in 2013 in the Elite Eight, the famous game where Kevin Ware broke his leg in one of the most gruesome injuries you'll ever see in any sporting event anywhere. He was just jumping up to block a routine Tyler Thornton jumper, and his leg it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, it was a very, very close game that St. John's ran away from Duke in the second half. But two, incredibly memorable, incredibly important games as Duke has faced St. John's. Sorry, not St. John's, but Rick Pitino, the head coach of St. John's, in the past. A lot of history on the line here as we play St. John's and Rick Pitino, their coach. So, Donald, get us into it by telling us a little bit about the season that St. John's has had, who they've played, who they've beaten, and how they've been doing, because the answer is they've been doing really, really damn well since early January.
Well, look, they're 30-6 on the year. They were 18-2. They were first in the Big East. They won the Big East regular season. They won the Big East tournament. But more importantly, they are probably the team that has been flying the most under the radar in terms of how well they've been doing. Since January 3rd, they have won 21 of their last 22 games. And I'll get to that one loss in a second, but let's talk about some of the wins they have. Very, very strong. Baylor, Ole Miss, Georgetown. They've beaten Butler twice, Creighton twice, Villanova twice, Seton Hall 3 times, UConn twice. They've beaten Xavier twice, Providence twice, Marquette twice. This is a team that has ran through the Big East, and I believe, with the exception of, UConn and Seton Hall, and Providence were the 2 losses that they had, and they avenged both losses at some point during the season. So this team is very, very strong. Their losses, again, Providence, UConn, Kentucky, Auburn, Iowa State, and Bama. That is a who's who of college basketball.
Nothing wrong with any of those losses.
Nothing wrong with any of those losses. In the NCAA tournament, they beat Northern Iowa, the 12 seed. They beat them by 26. And then the buzzer beater, they beat number 4 seed Kansas 67-65. Now, let me go back to that one loss that they've had since January 3rd. It was against UConn. It was at UConn. I believe it was at Gamble. I don't think it was in Hartford. But they lost 72-40. Now, that is a very big outlier here. Why is that an outlier? Because they went 6 for 36 in that game from 2-point range, not from 3. In fact, they were better from 3. They were 5 for 20 from 3. They only scored 14 points in the second half, and it was a game where everything that could go wrong for St. John's did. UConn started hitting shots, and the lid was on the jar for them in the second half. They could not hit water from a boat. As I mentioned, they were 16% on the game from 2-point range. That is an outlier. We cannot expect that, but that is the only outlier they have in the last 3 months.
Yeah, Donald, you mentioned how well this St. John's team has been playing lately, despite that, that bad loss to UConn. I said, folks will recall, when you and I were doing the preview of the entire tournament, when we got the bracket and we saw that St. John's was in our bracket, I was furious that St. John's was our number 5 seed. That I said that this team is a team that is way better than a number 5 seed. And at the time I said, they've been playing great since that early January date when they really started to turn things around. I went ahead and looked. They've been playing like the 9th best team in all of college basketball since early January. They have a record of 21-1, and no disrespect to UConn or Michigan State, but this is basically, to me, this is a Final 8 matchup for Duke, because I think whoever wins this game on Friday between Duke and St. John's, I think will be the favorite. I think would be the team that I would pick pretty convincingly to win over whoever wins that UConn-Michigan State game and go to the Final Four. I'm, again, not putting down Michigan State or UConn. And if Duke wins this game and we're previewing them, I'm sure I'll have terrifying things to say about each one of those teams. But for the moment, I really think this Duke-St. John's game is the toughest game in this region that is left for the Blue Devils. As I mentioned, St. John's has been the 9th best team in the land over the past couple months. They are specifically in Ken Palm, they're 16th, but since January 5th, they've had the 4th best defense in college basketball. I mean, wow. 4th best defense since the calendar turned. Here are the top 4 teams. Duke has the number 1 defense. Houston has the 2nd best. Arizona 3rd. St. John's, the 4th best defense over the past couple months of college basketball. No one, Donald, has scored more than 72 points on them in more than 2 months. The past 3 games, the Big East Championship against UConn, their first round game against Northern Iowa, and then that game against Kansas. Past 3 games, St. John's has given up 52 points, 53 points, and 65 points. Donald, if Duke can get to 70, I feel like we're in good shape. But it ain't gonna be easy to get to.
And Jason, real quick, I think when you think about going back to Selection Sunday, when you look at this, it also, just looking at this team, it further makes me question what they were thinking in that room, putting them as a 5 seed, because UConn was the 2 seed in their group in this same bracket, who they just destroyed by 20, right? They beat them in the tournament. They beat them in the regular season. They won the Big East regular season and tournament. They've only had the 1 loss to UConn since January 3rd. And as we mentioned, their losses that they had before that aren't bad. They're actually really good teams, most of whom made the tournament. So I'm confused as to how this team ended up being 5th. But hey, that's the road we have now. So I like the fact that we're going up against a team who is physical and has a lot of these attributes that match up well with just about any team. And I think this is a huge challenge for us that we're hopefully willing to undertake.
All right, so let's get to some analytics specifically. I've already told you a little bit about, how impressive their defense is, and I'm gonna get into the analytics of why their defense is so good. They really do 2 things very, very well. They deny you good shots, and they turn you over. That's a pretty impressive combo. It's hard to get a good shot. It's hard to even get off a shot against this team. Teams only hit 47.4% of their 2-point field goals against St. John's. That's a really, really good number. Teams hit just 31% of their threes. They're not a great shot blocking team. They're a good shot blocking team, though it's worth noting they lack the elite length and like the 7-foot height that has been frustrating for Cameron Boozer. I don't see the St. John's team being able to frustrate him the way teams that have that kind of elite length on the inside do, because that is not the profile of this St. John's team. It's really worth paying attention to that turnover rate, though. St. John's turns teams over close to 20% of the time. 1 out of every 5 possessions ends up with St. John's going the other direction and you not even getting a shot. In their 3 most impressive wins over the past couple of months, the game they had against Kansas, the game against UConn in the Big East Championship, and they had a 30-point win over Villanova. I looked; those are like their 3 best games over the past month and a half or so. In all 3 of those games, they held their opposition to about a 25% turnover rate. This St. John's team applies pressure all over the floor. They love to make it hard for you to inbound the ball. We saw Kansas repeatedly, Donald, had possessions that ended before the possession even started. they literally couldn't get the ball inbounds, and they would have a turnover. And that's going to be so important for Duke, because that's how St. John's gets easy buckets. In a second, when I transition to their offense, not a lot of good things to say about their offense. But when they're getting turnovers and racing the other direction, That's what St. John's does well on offense. One other thing I want to note about them is that St. John's does a really good job of denying you the three-point line. Only 33% of opponent shots come from three. We talked about it. Duke shoots like 45+% of our shots from three. A lot of teams in the country want to be around 50% of their shots from three. St. John's only allows you to take a third of your shots from three-point lands. It is not easy to get a good look from out there. They play a switching man-to-man, and their big men are very mobile. They have quick feet. They are able to play physical, and they're able to get up on guys. So when their big men get switched onto guards, they do not get outmatched. In fact, they've got one big man who I'll talk about him in a little bit. Frankly, when he gets switched onto a guard, he's licking his chops. He's like, yeah, I got you now. And the impressive thing is the St. John's guards, for the most part, are fairly big. So their guards, they've got enough size that they won't get trucked by an opposing big man. So when St. John switches a small onto a big, their small guy isn't in that bad a shape, and they're just really good at they're just a great team at switching on defense. They're gonna be really physical with you. They do a really nice job of not committing fouls despite being physical. And I think a big part, Donald, of all the turnovers they get is teams get tired of being banged, being bumped, being held. You just sort of lose concentration when that happens. And I feel like, Duke's young point guard, Caden Boozer, he's going to have his work cut out for him in this game. He's going to have to, I hope that they have him going against Dame Sarr all the time in practice. Yeah. Caden needs to be getting some pressure. And I'll say this, I'm glad we are getting a physical team like St. John's on several days rest, as opposed to getting them on a quick turnaround. Just because this Duke team's a lot younger than St. John's. And even though Duke plays physical, this is St. John's club that's going to play really physical against us. And I'm glad we've had a few days to rest up a little bit. Let me get to the offense really quick.
Real quick on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick then, Jason, because I think the physicality part is one thing, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but we also just saw some physicality against TCU.
For sure.
So, and like you mentioned, on 2 days rest, we got that kind of physicality. This is a step up in that department, but at least we've gotten a taste of it, so we kind of know how to react to it in some ways.
All right, let's get to the offense really good. They're just not good in the half-court offense. They want to get out and run. They want to score points off turnovers because they're just not a very good shooting team. They hit 33% of their threes. It's not terrible, but not great. They hit 51.5% of their twos. Again, not terrible, but below average. They do a really nice job of maximizing possessions, though. By that, I mean they don't turn the ball over a lot. And they're a good offensive rebounding team. So they're not going to hit a ton of their shots, but they're going to rebound a lot of their missed shots and put them back. They rebound 35% of their missed shots. If this Duke team has dominated the boards against almost every team it has faced all year. If you see St. John's getting second and third chances, that's a problem. That is a problem for Duke. That is part of how St. John's succeeds on offense. If Duke can turn this into a slower paced game, force St. John's to grind it out a little bit, they're just going to have real trouble keeping up with us because they score so poorly in the half court. Stylistically, they're good at drawing fouls. St. John's gets to the free throw line a lot. And they don't I mentioned they don't give up a lot of threes. They also don't shoot as many threes, but, and this is kind of weird. In the NCAA tournament, they've kind of become a different team. Like on the season, 34% of their shots come from 3-point range. They've had exactly 2 games all year, St. John's has. Only twice all year have they taken more threes than twos in both of their NCAA tournament games. It's like they went the entire season as mostly a team that doesn't shoot threes, and suddenly they entered the NCAA tournament and they went, oh, you know what? We should start shooting out here. Now, it's not like they've been hitting a ton of them. They're not like great at them, but they're taking a lot more than they used to, and it's just an interesting stylistic change. I'll be very interested in seeing if that continues against Duke. Again, like I said, a team that never shoots more than 50% of their shots from three has done that now, back-to-back games in the NCAA tournament. And Donald, 2 final notes. that I've got on them before we get to the players and stuff. Just again, as I said, they're an old team. They got a couple sophomores who play a little bit, but everyone else are juniors and seniors. They've got plenty of guys who've had redshirt years, injury years, things like that. They got some guys who are fifth-year seniors. There are no freshmen on this team who will play against Duke. I'd be shocked if any of their freshmen make it off the bench. Also, and this is something you pay attention to a lot, Rick Pitino, dude is old school when it comes to fouls. Yep. If you pick up 2 fouls in the first half, Rick Pitino says, you're sitting over here. You're not going to be in the game. I'm not going to risk you picking up a 3rd foul. I don't care who it is. It could be the best player on the floor for them. He could pick up 2 fouls in the first 2 minutes of the game. Rick Pitino says, you're sitting. They are, did you see the number? 363rd. Yes. 363rd out of 365 teams at having guys play with 2 fouls. 2% of minutes. If you have 2 fouls, only 2% of the time does St. John's allow you to continue to play. I think it's that Rick Pitino may have overlooked the guy had 2 fouls in those 2 minutes. Like, wait, I've left him in the game. Get him out of there. It's kind of crazy. It's also worth noting that they're not super deep. They've got like 8 guys who play in virtually every game, and they're very interchangeable in terms of positions. It's just sort of the nature of the way their team is. So if a guy gets missing, if a guy gets in foul trouble, they got someone else they can put in for him, and they don't miss a beat. It's just sort of the nature of the way their team works.
I think it's 2% is the actual percentage of 2 foul participation minutes. I think what probably happened was someone was like, Coach, trust me, I'm not going to get a 3rd foul. Trust me. And once in his life, Pitino was like, all right, man, you got it. And like 30 seconds later, that man picked up his 3rd foul, and Pitino said, never again. Don't ask me no more. Don't come to me with this sob story about you can trust me. I don't trust nobody anymore. So that's why everybody goes to the bench. It's a big deal when those guys get into foul trouble.
Yes, it is. All right, we're going to talk about the players in a little bit. We're going to have some other notes about things going on, and Don's going to give you his keys to the game. All that after we take a quick break here on the Duke Basketball Roundup. Duke fans, DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook for live betting, is built for March. The tournament is unexpected. The rewards are guaranteed. DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering the most generous rewards in the market.
That's right, Jason. With DraftKings, the #1 sportsbook for live betting, you're not just betting what might happen, you're betting what's happening. New to DraftKings? Bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly.
That's not a bad deal, Donald. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code DUKEBB. That's code DUKEBB to turn $5 into $200 in bonus bets instantly. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Not sure how to tackle your taxes? Are you sweating the small print? You may be experiencing FOMO, the fear of messing up. The answer? Using TurboTax on Intuit Credit Karma. They help you get your biggest refund, and then we help you do more with it. With a personalized plan designed to help you hit your money goals. It's time to take your taxes to the max. Start filing today in the Credit Karma app.
LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
The Lincoln Spring Sales event is on now, and there's never been a better time to experience the feeling of driving a Lincoln. Pictures, sunlight through the available panoramic vista roof, music, weather, and maps on the 48-inch panoramic display, and a drive so smooth that inspiration rides up front. Stepping out better than you got in. That's the Lincoln feeling. Get behind the wheel of the 2026 Lincoln Nautilus SUV and discover exceptional offers only at your local Lincoln retailer.
All right, we're back from the break on the DBR Podcast. Jason and Donald, as we continue to preview St. John's. Time to talk names. Time to talk about players. The St. John's offense, it is built around Zuby Ejiofor. 6'9", 245 pounds, All-American. He's not a first-team All-American. He's like a second or third-team All-American, but a hell of a player. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Not entirely different from Cameron Boozer. Like the way he plays, the way they run their offense through him and the such, Zuby Ejiofor is sort of like Cam Boozer light to some extent. A bruising guy in the post. You know, he's going to put moves on you down there, but has an advanced skill package, very creative in his initiation. I'm going to give you the stats, Donald, on him, and you're going to be like, yeah, that sounds like every one of them. You'll be like, that's just a little worse than Cam Boozer, a little worse than He averages 16.3 points per game, 7.3 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game. Like 10% worse than Cam Boozer in every one of those places. He leads them in blocks at 2.2 blocks per game. He's not a 3-point shooter. He's going to take maybe one or two of them per game. You know, teams leave him wide open out there, but he hits less than 30%. So he's not necessarily a guy who's going to bother you with those threes. He's an elite offensive rebounder, like one of the top 30 or 40 offensive rebounders in all of college basketball. He's a future NBA player. There's no doubt about that. And something to watch out for with Zuby Ejiofor, he will draw fouls on you. He uses his physicality to force, he makes moves, puts you in a bad position, and then he draws a foul. He draws close to 7 fouls per 40 minutes played, and that is something Duke has to watch out for. I suspect you're going to see Malik Brown and Patrick Gungba mostly matched up on Zuby Ejiofor, at least on defense. I don't think Duke's going to risk Cameron Boozer getting in foul trouble on him, but be on the lookout, especially like Pat gets in foul. Pat and Malik, both those guys get in foul trouble. Zuby may spend a lot of time at the free throw line this game. The guy next to him on the front line is Dylan Mitchell. He's 6'8", not much of a scorer, just about 8 points per game. Good rebounder, 7+ rebounds per game. They do run a lot of stuff to him. He gets like 3 assists per game. He's a good passer. He's a really smart ball player. Dylan Mitchell is an outstanding defensive player. He has long arms. He has quick feet. He's very disruptive. I'm going to go ahead and make another comparison. Not entirely different from Malik Brown. Again, not saying he's as good as Malik Brown, not saying they're exactly the same, but you're going to see some little similarities here and there, and it's really interesting to note. So Darren Peterson of Kansas, hell of a player. Absolutely in the running to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. Darren Peterson was going off a little bit early against St. John's in that game against Kansas. He hit a couple 3-pointers early on. You know what Rick Pitino did? Rick Pitino took 6'8" Dylan Mitchell and put him on Darren Peterson, and Dylan Mitchell shut off the water, turned off the faucet. I'm not saying that Darren Peterson got nothing against him, but he didn't get much, and his efficiency went way down. I think you will very likely see Dylan Mitchell. This entire game, Dylan Mitchell is going to be guarding either Cam or Isaiah. I think it's possible they may put him on Isaiah. That they may really try to see if they can shut off Duke's secondary score and let Zuby try and contain Cameron Boozer. It's going to be very interesting. I'll be paying attention to who Dylan Mitchell is on. Now, look, I mentioned St. John switches a lot, so he's going to be all over the place. But Dylan Mitchell's a great, great defender. The other forward is 6'7" Bryce Hopkins. Bryce Hopkins, this is so weird to me, Donald. The whole reason that St. John's beat Kansas is because Bryce Hopkins did something he hasn't done all year. So he averages less than 3 3-point field goal attempts per game. So he's going to shoot a little bit, but not a lot. He hasn't shot more than 5 3-pointers in any game all year until they played Kansas, and he went 6 of 9 from 3 against Kansas. Like this came, I'm sure Kansas's scouting report was not make sure Bryce Hopkins, he's okay. He hits 35% of his threes, but it's not like you're This wasn't like you're playing against Isaiah Evans or something. Like Bryce Hopkins comes out of no place, hits 6 out of 9 3-pointers. And as a result, if he merely hit 4 or 5 out of 9, which would have been a great game, they lose that game to Kansas in all likelihood. Dude just went off. So Duke has to be on the lookout for him. I mean, maybe he's feeling something weird. By the way, Bryce Hopkins is their second leading scorer at better than 13 points per game. Really quick on the backcourt, 6'5" Oziah Sellers, and then the only small guy on the team, 6'1" Dylan Darling. Sellers is their shooter. He's shot 147 threes on the season. That's the most in the team. He hits them at a 35% rate. He averages right around 10 points per game. Dylan Darling is a pest on defense. He's a guy who'll get in your back pocket. He will get his steals on you. He mostly tries to set up his teammates, and he doesn't turn the ball over as a point guard. Not much of a scorer. Against Kansas, he had 2 points, but we all know where those points were scored. Those 2 points were the last 2 points of the game. He had the game-winning layup against Kansas. So Dylan Darling, not a guy who you would expect to score a lot, but when the chips were down, when the game was on the line, he went in there for that driving layup and got it.
And just going back to Oziah Sellers, we should remember him because he played for Stanford last year. I believe he got 11 points against us last year in that game. Now, we blew Stanford out by 36 in that game. I think we scored 106 points. But Oziah Sellers is clearly familiar with Duke, as is Ian Jackson, who I think we'll see a little bit in this game as well.
I was about to mention him. I was going to say usually I kind of stop when I get done with all the starters. There are 2 guys off the bench I want to talk about. They got 2 flamethrowers who go off the bench. Ian Jackson from UNC last year and Josan Sanon. Both those guys never saw a shot they didn't want to take. Like Ian Jackson especially. Considering they only play like 18 to 20 or so minutes per game, those 2 guys, they take more than 5 threes per game. Like they come in off the bench, just boom, boom, I'm firing. Ian Jackson is like, his usage, for a guy who comes off the bench, his usage rate is like close to 28%. He reminds me, I'm just going to say it, Donald, you're going to love this. You know what I'm about to say. Reminds me a little bit of Vinny the Microwave Johnson. Vinny Johnson. Mm-hmm. Folks, you got to be a little bit older to know about Vinny Johnson, a great player for the Detroit Pistons, who was nicknamed the Microwave because he came in the game and he made things hot instantly.
Quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my favorites.
Yes, Vinny Johnson. I don't know that Ian Jackson. He's not built like Vinny Johnson. Vinny Johnson was like
Vinny Johnson is a truck.
Exactly. Ian Jackson's much thinner, but Ian Jackson's going to come in and I'm telling you, the first minute he's in the game, he's going to shoot a 3. It's going to happen. Ian Jackson wants to do that to Duke. So those are the players worth paying attention to in this game. A lot of guys, like I said, a lot of interchangeable parts. They've also got a 6'11" guy who comes off the bench to give him some depth on the front line, although he doesn't score a lot and stuff like that. It's just a really, really interesting lineup. And every guy out there, as I said, they can switch, they can defend, they're going to be a pest, and they're going to be physical.
And I think with the guys that are mostly in it, with the exception of Ruben Prey, who you mentioned 6'11", Dylan Darling is 6'1". Everyone else between 6'5" and 6'9". And so it's similar
interchangeable parts, man. Like I said, yeah,
it's similar to that where they have a lot of guys who can play 1 through 4, 1 through 5, and defend 1 through 5, especially. So it's going to be a fun game from that aspect of how teams match up in kind of the chess game between the 2 coaches as to who's guarding whom at particular points during the game.
Well, dude, you got to get us to the keys to the game. What you got for me?
So, Jason, there's one question, right, that is on everybody's mind because, unfortunately, John Shire put it into our minds on Monday morning. Will Caleb Foster play? But I'll go even further with that because he still said outside chance. I will say that they have the day before the game they'll have have press conferences for everybody, including John Shire. I will be at those press conferences tomorrow, so you're not going to obviously hear on this show what he has to say about the status of Caleb Foster. But if Caleb Foster does play, will he be effective? It's not necessarily a key to the game, but we all know the boost that we got from Pat coming back last week. We should expect a more improved Pat. And when I say more improved, he still got a plus 20. last week
in
against
13
TCU.
minutes. I think the big thing is, do we get Pat for 20 or so minutes? That's what you got to hope. Yeah.
And you're going to want that against Central 4, right? Like you're going to want your 6'11" guy going up against the 6'9" wide truck instead of, and then Malik Brown can be free to do a lot more things. You saw Malik Brown have a much improved game against TCU because with Pat in the game, he was freed up to do a little bit more things, including get those deflections that we know and love. So if Caleb Foster comes back in the game, will he be effective? I think that is going to be a fascinating thing to watch. And honestly, if he comes back and he can do with something similar, play 10 minutes, make a few plays here and there just to give that boost to the squad and also free up guys to do a little bit more of what they do best and not have to assume a lot more of his responsibilities, I think is going to be great. This, for me, this game comes down to the paint. Winning the paint, I think, is going to be key, not just on the glass as far as offense, but winning the glass as far as rebounding. The one thing that they are good but not great at, St. John's is defensive rebounding. They do let some teams get offensive rebounds on them, and that has popped up from time to time. Now, they've overcome some of those, but I think it's a key factor here that if we can continue to be great on the glass. I mean, how many times in a row have we had double-digit rebounding margins against our opponents?
It's a lot.
If we can continue to do that, it's great. That's a great sign to have. Now, one thing that they do is they force people to take tough shots. We do the same thing. So I'm fascinated to see how that matchup goes, particularly if you remember against TCU, our average 2-point distance was inside that 4-foot area, right? It was 3.4 feet. Now, that is something that we could try to do as much more as we can, but we want to push them out a little bit more, right? They usually take shots 6 feet. That's their average 2-point distance. And so if we can push them out just a little bit further, again, those are tough shots they're having to make. The last thing that I have, or I guess two more things. One, take care of the basketball. That's the one thing we saw against TCU that was that we wanted to improve. We had 17 turnovers against them. Let's lower that number and make it where your favorite stat, the field goal attempts, that disparity is not as great. Or in fact, we're winning it because of the fact if we're winning the offensive board department. Last thing I'll say is this. This is a tough team. We've seen them play. And again, as I mentioned, in the grand scheme of the national conversation, they have been under the radar for far too long. It's now time to talk about them. But I think the fact that they're physical, the fact that they're tough, the fact that they're St. John's is something that we should embrace. We should embrace that challenge because we have one X factor. We can be Duke. And if we are Duke, if we play Duke basketball, this will be a game that sees us go into the Elite Eight because we have taken out a physical St. John's team. I think we can match the physicality. We can match them position to position. We can do all those things. But if we can execute Duke basketball and control the tempo of the game and control the pace of this game, St. John's is going to have to play catch up to that. And that is a battle I do not think they can overcome.
I like it. All right. Last thing I want to note, the Blue Devils are about a 6.5-point favorite in Vegas. Ken Pomeroy's computer says we're going to win this game by 7 points. But this is a tough, really, really, really tough game. Hey, Donald, before we go, I know you wanted to talk about the Duke women who have their big Sweet 16 game come up as well.
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit yesterday, but of course the Duke women are in the Sweet 16. We now know what time they're going to play. They will be taking on LSU in the Sweet 16 in Sacramento. That is a 10 p.m. Eastern time start. So the great thing for us is if you're just watching basketball all night, you're just going to have to flip from CBS to ESPN. And then after that, you can toss the remote. So luckily for us, there's not going to be any overlap between these games. That was one thing I was worried about before they announced the time for this one. But as I mentioned, they took out Baylor in the round of 32, which was a team that we lost to in Paris the very first game of the season. We now play an LSU team that we lost to in Cameron back in December. But that game, if you remember, Jason, as we've watched, was kind of the switch that turned on in Duke that went from a team that was struggling mightily to a team that rattled off 15 straight wins and really crept back into the national picture as a team to be reckoned with. So this is kind of their full circle moment where they can come and say, this team that was our switch, the team that embarrassed us enough that we knew we had to come together. And this is the lead. This is a team where they started out with a double-digit lead to start the game. I think they were up 13-0, and they ended up losing by double figures. They want to beat this team. This is a game that I know that they're looking at and say, this is a winnable game. I know Kim Mulkey always has her LSU team prepared, but this Duke team, Kara Lawson, I believe in her and these women to get the job done. So again, that game, 10 p.m. Eastern time, I believe it's on ESPN. But the Sweet 16, they have a chance to take yet another step towards that Final Four, and I'm hoping that we get to talk about both teams on Saturday morning.
Yeah, and by the way, like in the advanced metrics and the such, LSU's number 5 in the land, Duke's number 7 in the land. Once again, like sort of, how do we get this team as our Sweet 16 matchup? It's just,
I mean, it's 2v3, so that's
yeah,
about right.
I guess, but like they're the best two seed by a lot, and we were underseeded as a 3 seed. The committee just hates Duke. All right, last thing. It started out as a rumor, and then it became the real thing. We are talking, of course, about the fact that Hubert Davis is no longer the head coach of the University of North Carolina. It was announced last night that the school has, I guess, bought out his contract. They fired him. I think I read that they sort of asked him to resign, and he was like, nope. And they went, okay, here's a big old fat check. You can go away now. Donald, it may be that by the time we finish recording this, that we already have some hint as to who's going to be the next coach at Carolina. It may be that it takes several days. I don't know. It's possible my comments that I'm about to make will be dead wrong, but I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think some of the names that have been tossed out across college basketball, names like Dusty May, names like Todd Golden, names like Tommy Lloyd, I am very, very unsure that these names make sense for the Tar Heels, because those guys, especially these guys who are already super successful at big time programs, almost all of them have buyouts that make it really, really difficult for you to snatch them away. Todd Golden at Florida has I think I saw it as a $16 million buyout. Carolina has a lot of money. The UNC program, there are plenty of boosters. There are plenty of folks who support that program. They've got a bunch of money. They just paid a bunch of money to make Hubert go away. They're going to have to pay a bunch of money to whoever they hire. They obviously want to have big commitments to their NIL program. I don't know that on top of all those things, they can afford a $10+ million buyout. That is what you would have to do to get a Tommy Lloyd or a Todd Golden or a Dusty May. That's why I think the names that are more likely are guys like TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State, who, by the way, has a really low, he only has a $4 million buyout. Mark Byington at Vanderbilt, sorry. They're a private school. We don't know the exact terms of his deal, but I can't imagine that he has like some prohibitively high buyout. It just wouldn't make sense based on his contract and things like that. So I feel like those names are probably a little more likely than the guys who are already at big time programs. And then obviously the other one that everyone's talking about, the guy who seems to be maybe the clubhouse leader, is Billy Donovan. Although that's another one. Like Billy Donovan's probably making really close to $10 million a year at the Chicago Bulls. The NBA pays coaches more than they pay them in college. That's just the reality. Same way NBA players are paid more than they get paid in college. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to bring Billy Donovan back, they probably would have to make Billy Donovan the highest paid coach in all of college basketball. That'd be my bet. So you're probably talking about $12+ million a year. These are big numbers for UNC. So I'll be very interested in seeing what they go after and what they do. It's a lot of money, and they're committing a lot of money to football too. They got some rich donors there, but I'm not sure the pockets are quite as deep as people think.
I also think they have to battle with a lot of different things within themselves, right? Like they think they are the greatest coaching job in America. They think that just opened. And so they think that all of these names that you just mentioned are teams or guys that at a drop of a hat, that no matter what, when Carolina calls, they will pick up, they will answer, and they will say yes. That's not reality. right? And the other thing
we've already seen it. Supposedly they reached out to Brad Sellers and
Brad Stevens. Yeah.
Brad Stevens, sorry.
Yeah.
Brad Sellers, bad basketball player. Brad Stevens, great basketball coach. They already reached out to Brad Stevens, and he said, "No, that's okay. I'm happy GMing the Celtics."
Well, I think even within that, right? Billy Donovan, last time he coached in college, there was no NIL, right? It's a whole new ball game. And he's been it didn't feel like it, but he's been in the league for a long time. And so is he, again, going to take a step down in salary to then relearn these rules? That's a big question. But again, UNC thinks that they are going to do that. The other thing that they are contending with is there are still some of their boosters who want someone from inside the North Carolina family. That's why Jawad Williams has been a guy that has been mentioned, who's an up-and-coming coach. He was on the 2005 team. Now, I wish for them a lot of pain and agony in figuring out what this is going to be, because it's going to be contentious. There's going to be some big wig donor on one side who's going to say, yep, I'm only going to spend my money if you bring in this type of coach. There's going to be people on the other side who say, keep it in the family. That's the only way we're going to spend our money. And then there's the football angle of things, as you mentioned, because they've already committed. They've already committed to Bill Belichick X amount of money, and they have to figure out how to find more. They'll find it. They're going to get a coach. But when it comes to Duke, how this relates is we're still competing with them, right? It doesn't matter who's lining up on the other side. I don't care. I want to beat them. I want them to experience pain. I want us to beat them by 47 every single time. And we're going to be competing with them with recruits. We're going to be competing with them for, again, dollar signs. We're going to be competing for eyeballs. We're going to be competing against them for attention. The great thing is, and I think it's kind of funny that it relates back to Duke, a lot of people in the national media have said that the reason this is happening is that John Shire has been doing so well at Duke that UNC can't overlook that anymore. And
100%.
Right. And that's right.
Donald, it's as simple as this. John Shire got Hubert Davis fired. There's no question in my mind about that.
I don't agree with that. Hubert Davis got Hubert Davis fired by a lot of the decisions that he made, right? But I think, again, they would probably be willing to overlook some of that stuff, the comebacks, the historic comebacks, the guys not panning out and going elsewhere and becoming great. Some of these other things that they have, the fact that they didn't make the tournament one year, then you basically needed Bubba Cunningham to get him in last year, and then last year and this year only having first round exits, right? Because they were still hanging on the hat that they beat Coach K twice in his last season. And that was Hubert Davis's thing. And they're also, remember, they're the first preseason number one to crash out of the top 25, and they did it in record time. They did it in 3 weeks.
And not make the tournament. First preseason number one to not make the tournament.
Not make the tournament, right? And we remember those. And so I think, again, they have this delusion. And sure, when Coach K was going to go, if there was an open job thing, we would think that Duke is the number one thing in the country, right? We'd be right. We're a Duke podcast. We're going to say we're right. But I think UNC has to understand that this is a new ball game and they're playing by old rules. And I think that is why this job search won't be as, easy as they think it's going to be, because UNC is across their jersey. And so I'm interested to see who they end up with. And I mean, look, again, Brad Stevens has already said no. Billy Donovan's likely going to say no. And a lot of these other coaches that they're talking about, okay, is that going to increase their value? No, because for me, UNC is already this job that I want to make sure that we're better at in every single angle. If it's Todd Golden, if it's, Tommy Lloyd, it doesn't matter, right? For me, I want to beat them. It's just a matter of who wants to catch this wrath. And if they want to get paid to handsomely to do so, fine by me. But I'm looking forward to seeing who they're going to be, so I know who to hate, and also, again, what they plan to commit and how they try to get this thing back on track. Because honestly, they're still the great thing for me is that no matter what they do, they're still looking up at us. And that has been the reason for all of their movements over the last few years, not just in basketball, but also in football.
So it's also worth noting that it's possible. There's a lot of talk that NC State could be looking for a new coach, that Will Wade is going to, after one season, is going to leave NC State and head back to LSU, where he originally had been. Donald, I saw something that absolutely broke my mind today. John Shire has been on the job at Duke. This is his 4th season.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know he's the 4th longest serving coach in the ACC now?
Yep.
Brad Brownell's got 16 years, Jeff Capel 8, Mike Young 7. Everyone else is 3 years or less. And John Shire, coming to the end of his, hopefully over the next couple of weeks, the end of his 4th season, is the 4th most tenured, the 4th most senior coach in the entire ACC. Conference is going through some things, man. It's kind of crazy.
Well, on the Will Wade thing, very quickly, I'm skeptical about all of that because, one, a lot of people were basing it, a lot of the NC State insiders were basing off the fact that he follows a lot of LSU sports, which he did because he was at LSU and got fired from LSU.
That's not why. That is not why people are saying this.
It is. Here's why. Because people are thinking he's going back to the university that they fired him because he gave them NCAA violations. I'm not buying the whole that he's leaving. If he does, hey, I'm I can be wrong on this, but a lot of the people thinking that A plus B equals Q are trying to say that this plus this in the hiring an AD that is his friend means that he's going back after 1 year. I just don't see it. And just the same way we've heard today, there was all these rumors this morning about Bill Self retiring from Kansas. He himself had to come out and say, I don't know what y'all talking about. I'm not retiring. So this is silly season. Ladies and gentlemen, we have this in soccer all the time when it comes to transfers and coaching hires. We have it in college football. It's now the college basketball carousel / silly season. So just make sure you know who beware of the sources that you're reading when some of these things come out, because there's going to be a lot of news coming out and a lot of people thinking that they're the number one source. So just tread lightly as we dive through this carousel over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, although I will freely say you and I are going to be paying very little attention to it because hopefully we're going to be paying attention to the Blue Devils playing basketball, staying on track for title number 6. Here we go, guys. All right, that's it for the latest edition of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Big game coming up Friday, 7:10 p.m., 7:15, something like that. Mm-hmm. Donald will be there. So be sure to tune in to the DBR podcast like Saturday morning after the game, because Donald's going to stick around the stadium. He's going to get us a little bit of sound from the locker room. He's going to talk to the players, and then we will have all that for you. And then hopefully we'll also be previewing a big game on Sunday. Until then, his name is Donald in DC. I'm Jason in Atlanta, and here the Duke Blue Devil Band playing us out and taking us to the nation's capital for the Sweet 16.
The comedy movie event of the year, Mike and Nick and Alice. Coming only to Hulu and Disney Plus this Friday.
Time to party.
That's a great attitude.
It's a time-traveling, ass-kicking movie event.
You sound insane.
Starring Vince Vaughn, James Marsden, and Asa Gonzalez.
I thought you were a clone.
Well, clones aren't real, dummy.
And time machines are super grounded in reality.
Mike and Nick and Alice. Rated R. Written and directed by Ben David Grabinski. Only on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers.